Okay, friends, welcome once again to another episode of the Prayer Focus. I'm really excited today. I feel like I say that every time, but I love every one of these conversations that we're able to have. Today, I have a friend I haven't spoken to in a little bit, but we've been connected or loosely connected for several years. I've really admired who Mike is. He has just really given himself to the place of kingdom leadership in the marketplace, an amazing resume. And I'll just shoot off a couple of his accomplishments here, and you're gonna know very quickly why I admire this man. But Mike Sipe, you're in Bend, Oregon. Well, actually Powell Butte, but Central Oregon, beautiful Central Oregon on the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. I miss Central Oregon so much.
We miss you too. Come back.
Okay, I will come. So, Mike, Army Ranger, former badass, current badass, investment banker, focused in mergers and acquisitions. You've helped thousands of companies create more than $1 billion or around $1 billion worth of revenue. Author, speaker, consultant, sought after advisor and consultant to top income earners in America. Leader of leaders, and you lead the 10X small group development groups. My goodness, it just goes on. I mean, I just grabbed just a couple. I mean, it just keeps going. So did I get all that right?
Sure. Well, and I'm married to Kathy, and we own 2 cats.
I forgot the most important part.
Yeah.
Kathy. Oh my goodness. What an
well, actually, we have
lady.
2 cats that own us. If I really want to be, honest about that. Yeah.
Well, I've just loved every interaction, every conversation. We've had many of them over the years. Everyone, I walk away from the conversation feeling like I just went to school and feeling like I was in the environment of a caring, loving father who just wants the best out of everybody. I've actually not met very few leaders that put out a servant leadership vibe in every conversation. It's not necessarily about what you can get, but how can I help you get to your next? And I've just really admired that about you. So I just really admire who you are in the Lord. So thank you for everything.
That's really nice. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. So I get to have a whole bunch of conversations, Mike, with many leaders. And one of the conversations that I continually am brought back to is this abiding life with the Lord. It feels like many leaders right now, it feels like across the nations and especially across America, many leaders are having a bit of a difficult time. I feel like there's some things that are going on. There's a lot of question marks, and there's the political landscape and the socioeconomic landscape that has a lot of question marks to it. But every time, it doesn't take maybe 5 minutes of a conversation before I hear the conversation come up. I just need breakthrough. I just need 2 or 3 things to move in my environment, in my business, or in my life. And I feel like the conversation of needed breakthrough is pretty constant. And today I was reading in your book. I've really enjoyed your first book, but you have another book coming out or already came out. And so I want to talk about that in a few minutes. But the conversation that I'd like you to begin with us is this. It feels like people wait until they need money and then they rush off to the bank and try to get a loan for money that they don't have in their bank account. So how do we keep this spiritual bank account in the black numbers, or having money to draw from when we have this thing that we need that we call breakthrough? So tell me about the building up to it and the lifestyle that is needed so that we're not in emergency mode needing a breakthrough every 10 minutes.
Well, I don't have an organized response to that, so I'm going to give you little piecemeal thoughts.
I love it.
The first one is a little nugget. We go to Shiloh Ranch Church in Powell Butte, which is cowboy church, and it is definitely cowboy church. Is great. Salt of the earth folks, and we have a just a salt of the earth, kind of grandfatherly pastor. And he has like a, I mean, he's younger than I am, but he's grandfatherly type.
Mhm.
And so he sits on a stool and he kind of, wanders around. And then I've learned that whenever he chuckles, here comes the shot. And so yesterday in church, he chuckled and he said, you ever get a call from somebody out of the blue that says they're going to come over to your house and visit you in 10 minutes? What do you do? And everybody sort of like sheepishly starts saying, well, we go clean everything up, and we start shoving stuff in closets, and because we don't want people to see how we really live, we want to make sure it's all like kind of pristine. So everything gets thrown in the dishwasher and the dirty clothes get shoved in the closet and all of that. And then when they knock on the door, we're like, so great to see you. Come on into my house. And everybody's like, yeah. He
Bless
says,
God and highly favored.
yeah. And he says, that's how a lot of us are with Jesus. Because Jesus said, but behold, I stand at the door and knock. I'm knocking, how about letting me in? And we say, you know what? I got to clean my house up first.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta get myself ready. I got to become sacred. I got to become special in order to allow Jesus in, because I wouldn't want to get him in my dirty house. He needs to see me all cleaned up. And Joe's comment was, no, that's completely backwards. He wants to come in and help you clean up your mess.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to help you clean your stuff up. And if you really think about it, it's ridiculous to think we could get clean enough, like in our own efforts, to be able to welcome Jesus into our spiritual house. And so that's the first thought that comes to my mind with this, is that we have to realize that we don't have to be God in order to welcome Jesus into our lives and to allow him to do the work that he wants to do in our lives and through us in the world. And so I think it's a false arrogance or a false American thing to think Jesus can only work if I've got my stuff all together. In fact, he does his best work when I'm not together. And the Apostle Paul talked about that, right? In my weakness is his strength. So that's the first thought that comes to mind. The second thought that comes to mind is, in our 10X groups, we've been doing a study of Western philosophy. And it's really interesting to look back to when the ancient Greek philosophers were doing their work. And it was thinking work. Okay. They were great thinkers, and they were tremendous thinkers. This was like 600 BC to 1000 AD. So long span where the Greek culture was really the predominant culture. And actually much of the thinking that was done then continues to today. One of the things that struck me was that Jesus dropped right into the middle of that.
Yeah.
And the thing that's important to realize is that the Greeks they didn't have the Jewish Bible. They weren't Jewish. They didn't have the Torah. They certainly have the Old Testament, and they didn't have the New Testament because Jesus hadn't even been born. So they looked at what was going on in religion and said, this just doesn't work for us. I mean, I don't really want to sacrifice my daughter to some random God. This is not rational to me to do this. And so they basically came up with what is now our Western philosophy, that reason is supreme and man's reason is supreme. And we can judge that in hindsight and go, well, yeah, but you forgot about God. Well, they didn't forget about God. They didn't know any better. So they did the best they could, but we're still working with that flawed paradigm that our reason needs to be supreme, because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
And we're still, even for men and women of faith, we think we're supposed to figure it out ourselves, and that our reason is sufficient for us to figure it out ourselves. And and of course, the reality of that is not the case. One of the books that we're studying is a massive book by a teacher named John Frame. I don't know if you've ever run into him, but this is the doctrine of the Christian life. And it literally is 1,000 pages, and it's on ethics. So we're working on ethics. And what he shows in that book is kind of a filter of the world. And one of the filters is what he calls a square of opposition. And that square of opposition is an image of a truly biblical Christian belief about God. And it contrasts a kind of a secular belief about God. And the one frame that it's hard to do this just like this because I don't have the picture for you, but if you can think the biblical side, whichever that would be for you, left or right, but for me that would be on the left. The not because it's left or right, but because that's what that is in the book. Anyway, the Christian worldview shows God as transcendent, which is a theological term. It's not a real word in the Bible. It's just a made-up word that describes God as above all and everywhere. And then immanent on the bottom left hand, which is another made-up theological word, just means God's here too. And as believers, when we really integrate this concept, it's totally sits well in our soul that God's both everywhere and all powerful and the creator of everything, but he's actually here with us. So
Yeah.
he's not up there, he's up there and he's here too.
Yeah.
And we can reconcile that and say, this makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
The non-believers go, I don't believe that God is here. In fact, he's so far away that we can't even really understand him. Even if there is a God, that'd be what you call agnostic on that quadrant. Actually, God's not really transcendent. God's in the table. He's in the rocks. He's in the trees. He's actually, I am God.
Mm-hmm.
So we see this contrast, and a lot of that contrast really comes from the quote unquote rationality of the Western philosophers. But the interesting thing about the Western philosophers, is this what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. This is
I
good.
realize it. Anyway, the fascinating thing about the Western philosophers who were so convinced that rationality was supreme is that when they reached places that they couldn't answer, like, okay, go ahead and make a tree. Well, I can't make a tree, but reason is supreme. Or any of the mysteries of life where they couldn't really answer it with reason, their justification was not that their reason was insufficient, but that the universe was unknowable. Basically, it wasn't my thinking, because my thinking is really supreme, but the universe is messed up. And so this was kind of their conclusion. And when you really track down the Western philosophers like that, you find that they all run into a wall, which is, I'm not God, even though I'm trying to pretend like I'm God. And so their reason breaks down and ultimately becomes irrational, because they say, well, it couldn't be me, it has to be everything else, which is totally irrational. And so basically what we're working on in our study right now is the integration of this idea that God is not just out there somewhere and unknowable, but he actually is knowable and here, and he speaks to us and is available to do that. I was teaching Saturday morning to a group of men in a church, and I said, God speaks to us, and like, it was interesting because most of them, including the pastor, were like, I wasn't sure they were with me. This was in a church, and an evangelical kind of church, and I'm like, no, really, God speaks to us, right? Doesn't he? Hello. And so it wasn't like, oh yeah, man. And so this issue about God being present and speaking to us, we have to come to that as a fundamental decision. Otherwise, we're not going to bother to abide.
Yeah. You said in your book, in the chapter right before, I'm talking the Avada principle. I'm gonna put this one and your other book in it, but one of the things in the obstacles of having an abiding lifestyle was our view of God. And you quoted A.W. Tozer. Is it all in our minds? Is it the way we think? Like you're just alluding right now to that same idea. It's the way you think. Is it all the way we think, or is there more to it?
Well, the Western philosophers and the theologians didn't construct their view of the world on the basis of feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't read a theologian like Spurgeon or anybody like that. You don't hear them going, how I feel today is like this.
No.
I'm like, well, my emotions are kind of telling me that God is like this. So, and you don't hear the Western philosophers. They were rationalists, right? You didn't hear them or read them saying, my feelings about the world are like this. And, oh, gee, let's just, we should just all feel this way and frolic in the fields, how we feel like whatever. It's not like that. They think it through. And I believe that God gave us a mind. We're made in the image of God, and we are sentient beings. We're thinking beings, and our thoughts matter, and our thoughts toward God matter. In fact, Paul says we're called to have the mind of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't read. Maybe it's there someplace. I'm not that good on the Bible, but I don't read Paul saying, you really have this gut feeling. Like I want you to have the gut of Christ. And like that's not the calling that I recall. It's we need to have the mind of Christ. And so I
Yeah.
think it really is a mental thing, and it's a mental decision to choose to abide, to choose to follow the Lord, to choose to embrace the Lord in what some would call irrational, as both up there and down here all at the same time.
Yeah. So I want to honor your time, and I know that you do need to bounce out here pretty quick, but one last question and give me 2 or 3 pointers, and then I'd like you to kind of tell us about your new book, and then I'll let you go. But I hear leaders saying about time management, saying, "Hey, I love that you have created this environment where you can have a daily or a weekly abiding with the Lord." I do it in my car. I listen to worship music. I sing songs on the way. But after Sunday morning, I'm going from one thing to the other. I just can't make time for what you're talking about. So debunk that and give me 2 or 3 pointers on things that people can do to have a daily rhythm of abiding with the Lord.
Well, a guy a lot smarter than I, the Apostle Paul said, it's like pray all the time, like live in prayer. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we, and I'm not good at this, right? I mess it up all the time. But the more that I am in conversation with the Lord as I'm running around in my car, going all these places and talking about it, the more that is an experience of abiding. But it's a decision, right? I have to mentally make that decision to do it. Going back to your question about thinking, I mean, I have to tell myself, okay, look, I like, oh yeah, hey Lord, here's where I'm going. What do you think about this? What should I do? What would be your plan here? So it's a conscious decision that we have to make. The other thing about time, time is an illusion, right? Time, we just made time up. Okay. It's like eternal time, God time. And you've heard others and heard me talk about Chronos and Kairos time. Chronos time is like on your watch, okay, man, I don't have time because there's these certain minutes and it's constrained. But Kairos time has no boundaries. And you've experienced this, things can happen that you would never expect to happen in a short period of time because God wants it to happen. And how long does it take for God to make stuff happen? Like just like that, or a lot longer, depending on what He wants. And so this issue about elasticity of time is a really cool thing to embrace, rather than the rigidity and the boundaries of our Chronos time, to embrace and step into the fluidity and flexibility of Kairos time, where if we follow what God wants us to do, time is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. So I hear you say continual conversation with God. Where are you going? What do you have to say about where are you in this? And what do you want me to be or do in this next 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it so much. So tell me about your new book. What is your new book? What were you trying to get to? What's it called?
So in addition to having the privilege of facilitating both faith-based and secular peer groups for about like 6 CEOs, I also sell companies. And I've been selling companies for 34 years, helping people buy and sell businesses. And so I wrote a book called Finish Strong, Exit Well, which is about how to prepare and position and sell a business for top dollar. And so it's a very practical, street smart guide for a business owner to say, okay, where am I at now? Where do I want to go? How do I want to exit? In what manner? And how do I systematically get to that point? And
Mhm.
it's kind of the synthesis of the work I've done with entrepreneurs
Wow.
to help them prepare for exit and then exit really well over the last 3 decades.
Yeah. Is it a book that is overtly kingdom minded, or it's like, hey, all of these have informed my life, so it's more covert kingdom, or how did you present the material?
Well, it's straight ahead business. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just and this is like okay, right? Because Christians can be really good business people. Okay.
Yes.
It does have a chapter on ethics, but it's just straight ahead ethics. So there's I wouldn't call it covert or overt or anything. It's just business talk. It's one business guy talking to another business guy. But what I would hope would bleed out of that is the heart of Jesus in the in the conduct of it, and then in I guess what might be a bit of covert finish. My story is at the end that talks about exiting well, really highlights the decision of a Christian business leader, not to say to the reader, hey, you have to do it this way or not do it this way, but a pretty amazing decision of a Christian business leader to give away a multi-$100 million company to benefit ministry. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's and my point is, hey, you can do what you want to with the business. You build it and then you get to choose what you want to do. You might want to do this or you might want to do something else, but you have the opportunity to build it in that way. So I would consider it to be a straight ahead blocking and
Faithforward.
just street smart, practical, but not street smart like how do you screw your neighbor? How do you manage to pawn off some ugly, nasty, broken business to some unsuspecting buyer? Not like that street smart. How do you practically build a great business that's worth someone buying?
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm going to put that link in the show notes as well and point people in your direction. But Mike,
Yeah,
like
that's
always, it has been an absolute pleasure. And I love every word that is so informed by the presence of the Lord. And I really appreciate your time today. So appreciate you. Thank you.
you bet. I hope you don't mind my like unscripted like
No,
wandering here.
perfect. I believe that this is what people really are looking for is let's go unpolished. What's the real? Let's go back into the dirt and the ugly and what's real. That's why I have these unscripted organic conversations like that and then let people eavesdrop into those conversations. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Appreciate you too. Have a great day, Scott. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to this short conversation. This is just a down payment. This is just the taste and see. In a few weeks or a few months, we'll have Mike back and we'll dig deeper into relationship and spirituality and the street smarts that he was just talking to and how that affects all of our relationships and our business and all of that. It's going to be great. So stay tuned, be blessed, and thanks for listening to the Prayer Focus.